Hi everyone, it's Lynch, and I'm going to be looking at the Jan Chapuis text, 7 Strategies of Assessment for Learning, most specifically relating strategies 1 and 2 to formative assessment in my classroom. We'll start by looking at what formative assessment is. According to Chapter 1, formative assessment is any formal or informal process teachers and students use to collect evidence for the purpose of guiding the next step in the learning process. I'm going to share with you some examples of what formative assessment looks like in my class. I use things such as assessment check-ins or short quizzes, homework assignments mandated by the district, class discussions, journal entries, thumbs up, thumbs down, exit and entrance tickets, as well as having students work collaboratively, things that most teachers are doing in their classroom. These types of formative assessments help me answer questions such as who is and is not understanding the lesson, what adjustments should be made, what are each student's strengths and needs or misconceptions, how should I group students in order to better differentiate them, and are students ready for feedback, and if so, what feedback should I be given? This will help me figure out where I am going, or students should know where I am going by looking at strategies 1 and 2. Strategy 1 says to provide a clear and understandable vision of the learning target. Strategy 2 says to use examples and models of strong and weak work to help students understand where they should be going. Harlan and James quote says to involving pupils in their own assessment means they must know what are the aims of their learning. It's important to know why are we learning this. We're not just learning for the sake of learning. Looking at that, we can reference a means to an end and making that intended learning clear. Students need to understand that the assignment is the means and the learning is the end. We're not just learning for the sake of getting a grade. Students should be able to see why. One quote that stuck out to me that I enjoyed was that targets on the wall are not targets in the head. I used to think it was great to post a lesson essential question on the board and reference it at the beginning of a class. Now I realize I should be checking in with students to make sure that they understand what the learning target is. It's also important to categorize those learning targets by type. Knowledge level targets, reasoning level targets, skill level targets, and product level targets, all on various degrees of what you want students to get out of each lesson. To do this, to provide a clear and understandable vision of the learning target, you can share the learning target as is, convert the target into language that students understand and then share it, or also consider converting rubric language into student-friendly language. Sharing a target as is, in my classroom, I often have to ask myself, did I mention the learning target for this lesson today? And not mentioning it once isn't good enough. Also, do my students understand why we are doing this learning activity? If I asked them, would they be able to say why we're doing what we're doing? Converting targets to student-friendly language, this could be an area of growth in my classroom. Providing students with a vocabulary wall tied to learning targets, and to pay attention to curriculum standards to ensure that student-friendly language isn't eliminating important or key vocabulary. Also addressing using rubrics to communicate learning targets. Introducing students to the criteria by which their work will be evaluated enables students to better understand the characteristics of good performance. So aligning rubrics to learning targets and their quality and so on. Sharing learning targets can be done during an anticipatory set, after students have had time to explore or discover, definitely before a summative assessment, and students should be able to answer the question or the statement, I am practicing this to be able to do something else. As a teacher, it's important to check for awareness of students. Are they able to answer the why we are doing what we're doing or clearly state the learning target? So at this point, you want to determine whether all students know what they are to be learning. An area of improvement in my classroom would definitely be strategy 2, providing students with strong and weak examples of work. The features of excellent work should be so transparent that students can learn to evaluate their own work in the same way that their teacher would. So that metacognition, assessing their progress. Looking at my own reflection, how do I communicate the intended learning of a lesson to students, and when does this occur? My math department is working on ensuring that students have lesson essential questions and learning targets provided to them at the beginning of each lesson, and that we reference them frequently. What do I do to check for the understanding of the intended learning target? Of course, those formative assessments that I listed before, but also asking them, why are we learning what we're learning? Checking that they understand the learning target and that students are able to repeat that to me. Asking myself, are my learning targets clear to me as written? If they're not clear to me, they definitely aren't clear to students. And so it's important to go back and make that student-friendly language for my learning targets to ensure that students are able to reference them and tell you why we're learning. In conclusion, by making the learning targets clear to students from the outset, we build student confidence and increase the chances that they will master the target. Thanks for checking in.